Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September 15 meeting of the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee. Before we begin, I do want to make an adjustment to the agenda. CB-91-2022 is being removed from the agenda. So if you're here on CB-91-2022, that's no longer going to be on the agenda today.
Thank you. CB-92-2022 will revise the zoning ordinance application specific procedures for review of certain zoning applications by the district council to limit review to appeals and other reviews required by law. The planning board is scheduled to discuss this bill today well, Ms. Hightower is back, so she may be able to update us on whether or not they've taken a formal position yet. However, the recommendation by the planning staff is that the planning board vote to support CB-92-2022 with amendments, and they provided an analysis for the planning board's review for this recommended position. The zoning hearing examiner provided comments in a September 14th memorandum to myself, and the Maryland Building Industry submitted a letter in support. Also in your virtual binder, there are several comments that have been received concerning this bill. I can either go through those if you would like, or at the appropriate time, or again, those comments are on the record and in your binder, and we'll go with the bill file for this legislation. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Chair Hawkins and I, as co-proposer, and will probably have some comments as well. I'll just make a few before we turn to the agency comments. CB-92, in my view, addresses a long-standing problem for this county. One of the worst development practices that we have in terms of our laws is called call-up, which is the council member or members electing to review a matter where there is no public opposition, there is no appeal by the public. CB-92 does not change the ability of the public to appeal and have a public hearing. I know there's been some misinformation communicated online and by email suggesting that CB-92 removed some right of the public to do something. That's not true. That's bad information. Either someone didn't read the bill or doesn't understand it. What it does do is it eliminates a practice where there is no appeal from the public. A council member elects to review a site plan and at that stage of the development review process, which for those who may or may not be aware, the site plan stage and that end of it is really the end of the development review process. It's not at the beginning. The beginning of the process would be at the zoning stage, and that is certainly appropriate to have us as council members heavily involved in the decision making at that stage. The process by the time of site plan review, which is a quasi-judicial function, meaning that we're sitting like a judge would sit, we're supposed to be dispassionately applying the law to a development application. That is not the appropriate time to be making political decisions about whether development is popular or not. That is not that is not the appropriate function of a quasi-judicial body. However, that's exactly what happens, unfortunately. And that is why call-up has been long recommended by everyone who's looked at the best practices to be eliminated. That no other jurisdiction in the nation does this. Nobody. And we lose out on economic development projects that we'll never hear about because people know that we have this strange practice called call-up where council members can just at the end of the development process, after millions have been invested, after a project that is in a particular zoning classification, which it is, can just be delayed because a council member chooses to do so without any appeal from the public. So that's what this bill would eliminate. It's the reason why planning staff, I got to give our planning staff credit. It's one of the most impressive memos that I've received from the planning staff on a piece of legislation. They are, I would argue, almost enthusiastically in favor of CB-92. I mean, they talk about in detail how the practice of call-up discourages and is anti-economic development. The very thing that we say that we're for as a county. The practice of call-up is one of the biggest, most detrimental things we do as a body to hurt economic development coming to Prince George's County. That is what it's all about. And that's what CB-92 is all about. It does not change, let me say this one more time, it does not change the ability of the public to appeal. Anyone who's heard me over the last several years has heard me rail against call-up. So excuse my my going on for a bit about it, because this is an issue I've been talking about for many years. This is an issue that others have been talking about. I'll leave it there as the overview of what CB-92 does. As the fellow proposer and the lead proposer, I'll turn to Mr. Hawkins to see if he has any additional to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your comments were right on point, but for me, we keep talking about our desire to get to Master Plan 2035. You mentioned what the planning board or the planning staff sent us. If I may just quote a piece of that, CB-92-2022 will eliminate the district council election to review development review application under the zoning ordinance. The election to review process causes uncertainty, subjectivity, unpredictable time and cost within the development review process. There are three fundamental principles of land use regulations: fairness, predictability, user-friendly regulations. Eliminating the district council election to review provisions will positively impact county's ability to compete with other jurisdictions to attract high-quality development successfully. The removal of the language will attract better housing choices, businesses, and associated quality of life amenities it desires. This is my comment now. This is all about getting to the Master Plan 2035. The planning staff also states that the election to review process is one of the county's most significant barriers to development. It can discourage developers and businesses from locating in Prince George's County. For those who choose to develop in the county, it diverts scarce financial resources that could be spent on additional amenities and public benefits to costly procedure and process. The elimination of election to review will do more to facilitate the type of high-quality development the county demands and deserves. The new state-of-the-art zoning ordinance contains objective development regulations and standards to divide the development review approval process. The code modernizes and consolidates zones and development standards, incentivizes transit-oriented and mixed-use development, protects stable resident neighborhoods, and requires high-quality development. The most effective tool for the council to direct development in an effective zoning ordinance, which has now been achieved. The new zoning ordinance, together with the council's review and approval of master plans, will be far more effective in accomplishing the council's land use goals than continuing the election to review process. Thank you, and plan this legislation gets us closer to the Master Plan 2035 intent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms.
Mr.
Brown,
Chair, I wanted to say to Mrs. Hightower, I hope I didn't take her thunder, but their memo explains it succinctly as better than I could ever do it. So thank you, Ms. Hightower.
Absolutely. We'll now turn to Ms. Brown. We'll now turn to agency comments.
Thank you. There's Ms. Bell. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. The county executive is in support of CB-92. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hightower?
Thank you, Ms. Brown. The planning board did vote today to support CB-92 with the amendments that were attached in planning staff's recommendation. They were technical amendments. And we did want to point out that this is not done by other jurisdictions. And this is a great step forward for the county council in development in Prince George's County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. McNeil?
Thank you all. My only issue with the bill was in my memo is that what is the other review that's anticipated? If it doesn't exist yet, we don't have to amend this law. And if it does exist, then we still may not have to amend the law right now, because I'm sure the other law explains what that review is. See, that was my concern all along. Removing the election is probably a good thing, but it's totally up to the council. But I didn't understand the additional language of any required review, because this ordinance is written where somebody wants to go to some other section in there to see what that is, and I don't see where we have it. So,
Thank you, Ms. McNeil. Ms. Savakos, did you want to address that?
Yes. The other review required by law is a little tricky because it is difficult after having an ordinance that has been around and contemplates an election to review for so long. There are little nooks and crannies where there are certain mandatory reviews that can pop up. So in a belt and suspenders effort, I wanted to capture those. But more specifically, the most prominent example that comes to mind is that there are conditional approvals in zoning map amendment cases, and such conditions that have been or may be still imposed by the council in approving a rezoning of land from one category to another within the county is this imposition of a condition that in subsequent phases of development that development entitlement process needs to be reviewed by the district council. So without trying to wave a magic wand around and anticipate whether or not that would be an appropriate exercise of the district council going forward, I did want to be mindful of addressing approvals that are in existence that have been recorded amongst the land records of the county, but are not codified in your code because they are conditions that run with the land as an approved rezoning application. So that was the primary purpose of including that language for the sponsor's consideration and approval and including it. Thanks.
Mr. Franklin, Chair Franklin, this is Danielle. Can I ask a question following up on Ms. Savakos' comment?
Sure.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks. So just a quick question, because one technical thing that exists in my district is that, as many people know, we have Legacy MUTC, Mixed Use Town Center Zone, and that operates in the town of Riverdale Park. But several moons ago, we also approved an MUTC zone for what is now known as Riverdale Park Station. That's where the Whole Foods is, for those who are not familiar with the name Riverdale Park Station. But as part of that approval process, the agreement that happened with the community was that those cases would be able to be reviewed by the county council. It was sort of part of the striking the compromise, so to speak, that happened way back when. Can you help me understand how this is written and the effect on that agreement that happened way back when? And would that change the ability then for district council to review MUTC in specific to the Riverdale Park Station project? This is a clarifying question for me. Thanks.
Sure. To the extent that that agreement, while not including the county as a party to that agreement, as I understand it, and again, the nuances of that specific agreement or compromise are beyond me at this moment. But I can tell you,
Savakos, I think it's actually written in. Like, I actually think there's text speaking to this when the approval was done. Actually,
okay,
I have to go back and find it. But
Sure. Well, then that simplifies the question substantially. What that would mean is, remember, all approvals of rezoning applications by law are done by ordinance. Well, an ordinance, as we know, has the force and effect of law. It is a law. So whatever requirement goes without approval of the rezoning, and in this case, it just happens to be to an MUTC zone, which is now legacy. There is no effect of this legislation on the operation of that law, and it would fall into the category of such reviews that are required by law. So there's another example of a required by law type of case that would still be necessarily reviewed by the district council. Thanks.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair Franklin. I think I need to go back and just double check how that is in the approval that happened. One would think I might remember all of this, but there's been a lot that has happened in those 8+ years since that happened. So I'll go back and look at the technical documents to understand further. Thank you for that response. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll now turn, any further agency comment?
Ms. Dennison, if she has anything to add.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I just wanted to explain the Office of Law's comment. Like the park and planning memo, I wasn't able to fully see the tables, and so I'm not able to opine on what's on the tables, but given their analysis, that is why I went ahead and said the Office of Law didn't see any legal impediments. But I put the little caveat in there for additional research and analysis just because I couldn't read the table. And I would like to be able to go through that before I completely sign off.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, for everyone listening and anyone that has commented in the agency realm, as you are very aware, we are now in a new zoning ordinance, which has a different platform associated with it. So the task of putting the tables that are included in the new zoning ordinance into a format that is a word-based platform is quite an interesting affair. Let me just say it that way. The purpose of showing those tables for anyone listening and for the members of the committee is really a technical exercise. There is not a substantive component to it. The meat of this bill is in the verbiage of the sections shown. The use of the illustrative inclusion of the tables is merely to go through the technical exercise of removing the carets and E inside that to show. Remember, the tables themselves are really not the law. They are illustrative examples of how it's supposed to work for ease of reading and clarity. Sadly, in trying to carry forward those illustrative aids, they made it more confusing in the viewing. But the only purpose for using those or putting them in the legislation was to go through the mechanical exercise of removing either district council election to review in the nomenclature on the left-hand side of the table, or to strike the portions of the table where in the existing law there is an E indicating the election to review option for the council. So I hope that clarifies for anyone.
Ms. Savakos, to ask a clarifying question. So, Ms. Savakos, does this bill address development applications that are still done under the previous ordinance in the transitional time period, or projects that are grandfathered?
If I understand your question, so the substance of this bill deals with how the deciding body, meaning the district council, is going to treat things that come before it. As I understand it, the grandfathering provisions or transitional provisions, as it were, in the new zoning ordinance are intended to provide flexibility to property owners. So to the extent that property owners still have the option of proceeding under the old ordinance, that would mean the development regulations that and authorities for the land use regulations that run with the old ordinance. How such an application would proceed operationally is what I think you're asking. Would that mean that those proceeding under the old entitlements, under the old ordinance, would they in fact be able to, or would they be somehow caught in some kind of call-up thing? The answer, in my view, based on a prospective application, is no. The way that the council would treat these applications that are coming through under abilities to develop under the old ordinance would not necessarily trigger an optional call-up based on a vestige of the old ordinance. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, that does answer my question. I was just wanting to make sure that this legislation addressed new applications that are being done under the old ordinance. Thank you, Ms. Savakos. We'll now turn to the public comment, Ms. Brown, and there is a, as you know, note a 2-minute limit.
Thank you. The first speaker is Mary Cook.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to say that, you know, we have not seen the impact of the zoning changes from the zoning rewrites on the Prince George's County community. And until we do, I think it seems prudent to postpone any decision to remove or alter this tool. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Alexandra Belay.
Yes. Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alexa Bailey. I'm a 20-year resident of Prince George's County. I'm here to voice my strong opposition to this ordinance. This ordinance would reduce the possibilities for oversight and discussion of land use applications. Why in the world would we try to reduce oversight and discussion on matters of such consequence? Here again, just like with the now tabled CB-91-2022, 2022, we, your constituents, see what is going on. This looks like another attempt to reduce or silence the voices of communities in land use decisions. And this is another attempt to embolden developers and ease the path to unchecked development. I and others are not anti-development. We want smart development. We want thoughtful development. We want development that involves ample discussion.
Only like kitty litter that
even if it's uncommon to use the current process of council members requesting additional review of development cases currently, because that process is in place, it leads to better engagement by developers. It therefore leads to development that better reflects the values of communities. When it comes to land use decisions, we as county residents, we want more review of development proposals, not less. And we want more community input, not less. And we want our elected officials, the city council member, the county council members that represent us, to be able to elect to initiate such additional reviews. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Leo Shapiro.
Ms. Brown, before we go to the next speaker, I know the chair had to step off for a second. The vice chair's on the phone, so she can't see. I think Mary Cook, if you can mute yourself, because we were hearing a conversation during other testimony. Okay, I think she did it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we are ready to proceed, Mr. Chair. Okay. Leo Shapiro.
Yes, we are. Yes.
Mr. Shapiro, Leo Shapiro. Next speaker, Cheryl Court. Oh.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Court. I am the Policy Director for the Coalition for Smarter Growth, working in the Washington metropolitan region, making the case for smart growth. Our mission is to provide walkable, inclusive, and transit-oriented communities and the land use and transportation policies and investments needed to make those communities flourish. At this point, we have to register our opposition to CB-92 to eliminate the council, district council review. We had been prepared to testify today in opposition to CB-77-91. But we regrettably oppose this this proposal at this time, even though we've participated extensively in the new zoning code process and in Plan 2035. We're glad to hear council members going back to talking about how important the new zoning code is and Plan 35 implementation is. We are, however, dismayed after such careful work and public engagement that we have so many bills being fast-tracked through the PHED committee into the council, CB 69, 77, 78, 91, 92, which really devalue the public's engagement in this 8-year-long process to create this new zoning code, which is to implement Plan 35. And so at this point, in this context, we do believe that a fuller discussion is merited for looking at removing the call-up provision, but we can't support it at this point. Removing the tool is premature given these objectionable bills that are being rushed through council that would radically alter the newly adopted zoning code. So we ask that that this not be reported favorably out of the committee. And then we also recommend a more deliberative process to assess how to potentially eliminate call-up and build trust in the development review process. We think that probably starts with the development review process with the planning staff and planning board. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jill Oliver.
Hello, I'm Jill Oliver. I am a resident of the county, live in Fairwood, and I want to voice my opinion to strongly oppose this bill. The reason I oppose the bill is that based on my experience in the county with these issues, development issues, I've observed that to the extent that I feel that it's very important that we spend the time fixing issues relative to communicating with residents. I believe lack of notice, cumbersome processes to register for public hearing, and allowing developers to check the box without really meeting with or engaging with communities or impacted residents are the reasons, some of the reasons why this particular process is needed. And like the prior speaker said, we should spend more time building trust with our communities and our residents by building stronger practices to engage them and allow them to provide their input and open discussion and feedback so that so you are hearing it as well as everyone in a transparent manner. So until that happens, I don't support this bill. But when it does happen, and hopefully it will soon, I believe this discussion would be warranted. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Cleveland Grant.
Good afternoon. Am I heard?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Cleveland Grant. I'm a resident of Cameron Grove, residing at 4 Bowdoin Court, Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and I am voicing my opposition to this bill. I am voicing my opposition to this bill primarily because it does take away accountability. It has been my experience that a lot of the times, and this is directed towards a comment by Member Hawkins and Franklin, there are opportunities, according to them, for us to go ahead and register our complaints. However, oftentimes, we don't even know that a development has been planned or that it's going underway until it's actually begun. That I can speak to from personal experience. To remove this particularly at this time when Councilmember Franklin said he has been trying to do this for the long time, or has been railing against this call-up thing for the longest time. My question to him is, if you've been in such opposition, why is it only now that you and Councilmember Hawkins are putting this forth? You've had a couple of years to do that. And now also, I look at the timing of this and wonder, why is it that it's coming now, particularly when 91 was also going to go in, and we say there is something wrong here. So I object to this, and as others have said, until we get this process correct, until we can get representation from those who are supposed to represent us, it looks like everything is going towards the developers. And with that, I will end my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Deidre Trass.
Trying to get my camera to start. There we are. Thank you. My name is Deirdre Trass. I live in Bowie, Maryland in Councilmanic District 4. I am here to speak against CB-92. We just had one of the most exciting primaries of the in recent memory. A number of citizens were candidates and voters because they have a love and concern for this county. This bill essentially eliminates the ability of a council member to ask for a development case to be reviewed by district council. I urge the council to vote no on this bill for the following reasons. First, removal of this tool goes against the will of the people who want council to be included in development review. I certainly have appreciated this step in the process as it allows additional input and testimony from the community. Second, the removal of this tool is a demotivator to developers. They will not be inclined to work with the community to deliver the community's vision without that possibility of additional review. And thirdly, removal of this tool before the newly elected council is seated is premature. It should be up to the newly elected council how they want to conduct development issues and not this outgoing council. Let the incoming council set their own procedures and priorities. Lastly, this bill disenfranchises those of us who voted in the primary election. I ask council members to represent the people who voted for you and not the special interests. There's no need to support this legislation. Review and oversight can make development projects better for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Troy Griffith. Mr. Griffith? There's a caller who just joined. Is that Councilmember Glaros coming back on? Because I know she lost a connection.
Yes, that's me. Jackie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay. Next speaker, Dolores Holmes. Dolores Holmes. Next speaker, Patrice Murray.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee chair and council members. I am Patrice Murray, Jeremiah Lane in Bowie, Maryland. My concern today is the introduction of Council Bill 92. This bill reduces the transparency of the work of the district council, specifically regarding zoning and planning matters. As a voter and constituent, I am writing to advocate for the transparency of our government. CB-92-2022 strips the ability of the very community you represent from expressing our concerns on zoning and site plan cases received from the Planning Board and Zoning Hearing Examiner. The residents of Prince George's County community deserve the respect to be notified in a timely manner of all legislative matters to be offered the opportunity to voice our opinions pro or con on these matters. It is unconscionable to rush legislation through its normal legislative process without there being an emergency to the health and well-being of the public at large. I thank you, Mr. Chair, for your explanation of this bill. However, I must state for the record that it has been said that the new state-of-the-art zoning ordinance contains objective development regulations and standards to guide the development review approval process. So it appears there is no reason to pass this legislation. I publicly call for you to vote no on CB-92. We voters are watching. Again, my recommendation is to vote no on CB-92. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Stasia Hutchison. Ms. Hutchison, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your first name. Ms. Hutchison. Next speaker, Hazel Robinson. Hazel Robinson. Next speaker, Valencia Campbell. Ms. Campbell. Next speaker, Rosita Stevens-Hulsey.
Hello,
Yes.
this is Valencia. I am
Okay. Okay, Ms. Stevens-Hulsey, if you give us a minute. Ms. Campbell, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Valencia Campbell. I currently serve on the Executive Committee of the Prince George's County Sierra Club. I am speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club's 900 members and 5,000 supporters in Prince George's County. Our chair, Janet Gingle, wants you to know that the Prince George's County Sierra Club opposes CB 92-2022. This bill seems to eliminate the power of the district council members to elect to review certain zoning cases, special exceptions and revocations, detailed site plans, and the like. Even if this power is rarely used, it is important that elected representatives have this power to review these cases to ensure transparency and accountability, which has been said already by many other speakers. CB 92-2022 seems to eliminate this power and limit district council review to appeals and cases where council review is required by law. This new zoning ordinance is a product of years of study, careful analysis, and stakeholder input. What has changed since the ordinance went into effect in April? Why make the change now? We urge the county council to reject this change to the new zoning ordinance. Let the incoming council have this power to act in the people's interest by electing to review these zoning matters as their predecessors have had in the past. Please vote no on CB 92-2022. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Stevens-Hulsey.
Yes, good morning. My name is Rosita Stevens-Hulsey, and I live on Robeson Place in Upper Marlboro, District 6. It is imperative that the citizens and constituents of District 6 have even more of a voice in what goes on in our district, and especially changes about land use which affect our community, our lifestyle, traffic patterns, clean air, and our ability to move around the county. We keep having large townhome projects proposed, straining our infrastructure systems, depleting our trees, adding stress on our school system, and adding more retail stores that are not wanted or needed. We need well-publicized public meetings on these types of bills before approving them. Reject the change. Let the incoming new council members settle this, and I suggest that we vote against CB-92-2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Martha Wells.
Thank you. I speak to you today. My name is Martha Wells. I am a member of the Town Council for the Town of University Park, and I speak on behalf of our Town Council. Following a thorough public process that spanned over 8 years, the new Prince George's County Zoning Code was adopted on April 1st of 2022. We're stunned to see the Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee consider a number of bills that undo or at least significantly modify the new zoning code. The new zoning code is not even 6 months old, and yet the committee is considering major changes. What is the rush to change the new zoning code? Other than the expected procedural tweaks to improve the document, why not allow at least a year before considering the substantive changes? The Town of University Park urges the committee to table these bills. The county zoning hearing examiner has already cautioned against a lack of due process in the consideration of major changes to the zoning code. Specifically, the town voices its opposition to CB-92. The Town of University Park is opposed. This bill terminates the ability of the district council to call up a development project that has been recommended for approval by the planning board, except by a formal appeal of a decision or due to legally mandated requirements. In our experience, the combination of local input via the municipal governments and citizens, along with careful district council review of projects through the call-up procedure, has resulted in quality projects that were welcomed by the existing communities that surround them. Eliminating the council's vote as district council in these processes significantly weakens the ability of our municipal voices to be heard and community concerns to be addressed. While the use of this tool has not been common, it is increasingly valuable as projects that are located in developed areas encounter increased need for community review and council support of amenities and features that ensure that they will be harmonious in their surroundings. We strongly support the existing language in this process and recommend that it be retained and the bill not passed.
Thank you. Next speaker, Carol Hurwitz.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? I think I need to just put my volume up here a bit. Okay. Thank you. Carol Hurwitz, I live in Adelphi, Maryland. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today. I do oppose this bill, CB-92-2022, with all due respect to the planning staff, planning board staff and the sponsors. The apparent additional administrative staff burden by having the district council elect to review a zoning appeal still limits the community's ability to participate fully in what is often a rush zoning ruling process. Further, this is a major change to county procedural law without time for adequate public review and comment. Many here today have already said they need more time to do research and analysis. This bill is premature. We still haven't seen the implications of the new zoning ordinance, as some have said, and we do want to see improvements in our county. But we know the community input going forward was reduced, and this adds to that problem. CB-92 would deny the ability of a council member to bring a proposed special exception, for example, or other zoning decision before the planning board before the district council for review, and would prevent the council from responding to their constituents' concerns about inappropriate development in their communities. especially if citizens have limited resources to stay informed and appeal a zoning hearing examiner's decision. Without such appeals, the district council to the district council and the ability to elect by a representative council person, the opportunity for the most effective community members to more easily address grievances will be lost, and they have to live with the consequences for decades. Do not rush a removal of any more public options. We need both of our current legal options. We're the lucky ones. We're informed, organized, keep our ears to the ground. We managed to be able to win in the past for our community, but others in the county may not be so fortunate. No, for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, John Robinson.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
My name is John Robinson. I live on Cool Spring Road in Adelphi, Maryland. I'm speaking to oppose CB-92-2022. The argument that Ms. Hightower made regards her opposition to CB-61 also applies to CB-92.
You know how. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So, Bill, there's something going over the top.
Yeah, Mr. Robinson. Someone is unmuted.
Can you reset my time, please? So I could, hello?
Yeah, it was Mr. Cleveland who had his thing on.
Sure, that's fine.
Can you reset my time, please?
That's the appropriate time you had left. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm opposing CB-92-2022. This bill is a major change in county procedural law, and as has been stated before, there hasn't been adequate time for public review and comment. This bill will deny the ability of a council member to bring a proposed special exception or other decision by the planning board before the district council for review. The planning board's idea of what constitutes quality development is frequently different from the community's view. This bill will prevent the council from responding to their constituents' concerns about what they view as inappropriate development in their communities. My own community was able to appeal a decision by the planning board and the zoning hearing examiner to grant a special exception. The district council agreed with our argument, and the zoning hearing examiner had erred, and we won at great expense to our community on the developer's appeal to the Maryland Court of Special Appeals. If this bill is passed, we wouldn't have the ability to even ask our council person to bring this before the district council for review. Fortunately, we knew this was going on and were able to participate in the procedure. We went before the zoning hearing examiner. The planning staff, when we talked to them, even before we went before the zoning hearing examiner, acted as if they were a representative for the developer and basically ignored all of our concerns. So this bill, I strongly urge that you table this or vote it unfavorably. If this is really necessary, it can be brought up in the next council that takes office in December. So please support the ability of citizens to have their council people represent their interests by calling things up for review when it's desirable for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Barbara Solner-Webb.
Yeah. I'm Barbara Solner-Webb, president of the West Laurel Civic Association and speaking up for our community. I want to echo the comments of all of the previous speakers. CB-92 seems yet another example of anti-citizen pro-development effort, just like CB-91 and the recent gerrymandering effort. It's my understanding that this call-up is used only very infrequently, yet is very important. Please remember that citizens elect their council people to represent their interests when the citizens don't have the time or bandwidth to follow each development application. So it's very important that the council people be able to bring up such issues if needed. Arguing that eliminating the specific call up by council members helps get us closer to the master planning intent is negated by all the special exceptions that the council routinely grants. So I would like to ask really, what is the downside of having relevant questions about development projects being asked? And urge everyone to, very strongly urge everyone to vote against CB-92.
Thank you. Next speaker, Dan Smith.
Thank you. I'm Dan Smith of Chevrolet. And like the previous speakers, I too oppose this bill at this time. And I must say that I've had significant problems in the past with this provision, the call-up provision. I think it's been abused. There have been threats of abuse that in it, like the text amendment process, which is of grave concern to me as well. In the text amendment process, there was a clear recommendation from the professional planning consultants and staff working on our zoning rewrite that this should be eliminated, the text amendment, or significantly reformed. Yet that was soundly put down by members of this committee and proponents of some of these wholesale changes. So this proposal, even though there may be some merit in it, only has merit in the context of the overall process. The overall process needs time to be understood and used. Clearly, there's not confidence and trust in the adequacy of public input in the process as a whole. So let's look at it as a whole in the next council, and let's not pick these off and try to put these through. So what I would say is that we don't want any of these bills right now that are substantially changing the zoning process, the zoning review process that has just been set up. We're going to be wanting changes, I'm sure, but let's look at them thoroughly. And some of you who are even going to be off this council have had great experience. You can come back and give us your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Christine Morrissey. Christine Morrissey. Next speaker, Greg Smith.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members, committee members. My name is Greg Smith. I live at 4204 Farragut Street in Hyattsville. I oppose this bill. I incorporate by reference the excellent comments by everybody who preceded me. This bill smells an awful lot like CB-91, which was tabled indefinitely. It feels an awful lot like the last minute attempt to gerrymander our voting districts. This bill should, as Dan Smith said, or as Carol Hurwitz and John Robbins said, this bill is a major change to procedural law and hasn't had adequate public review. I agree with Coalition Smarter Growth comments. Ironically, the only instance of a call-up that I'm directly familiar with, in that case, the council member was trying to speed the council's approval of the planning board's recommendation rather than slow it down. So I think we need to add more adequate review of this bill and its potential ramifications. And I think that the public needs more and the council needs more scrutiny of projects, not less. It's hard for me to believe that anybody with a straight face can look at all the development that's going on in Prince George's County and say that somehow developers aren't having a pretty good time getting their projects advanced and built. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Next speaker, Brian Wyvell.
Thank you very much. Speaking on behalf of Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 689, and also a resident myself at 5909 Cleveland Avenue, Riverdale, Maryland. Local 689 strongly opposes CB-92 and encourages committee members to vote against the measure. The right for a council member to request district council review is an important part of the community input process for zoning decisions. Residents feel more secure when they know that their council member has the right to ask to seek further review when necessary. Even when not exercised, that right has been able to resolve issues between developers and residents. It is unclear exactly what is leading to this measure being brought forward at this time. There is no organic upsurge of resident sentiment clamoring for the removal of this power from county council members. It's clear that this county needs to do more to promote smart growth and transit-oriented development. We question whether CB-92 would help promote these aims. We urge the committee to vote down this measure.
Thank you. Next speaker, David Brush.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dave Bross. I'm a longtime resident of the county. I've been here 42 years and live in University Park. I'm also a member of the Prince George's County Sierra Club and its executive committee. This bill would take away council members' power to have development cases reviewed by the council. There may be times when it is necessary to examine questionable development elements, plan elements. Bad development can adversely affect our county's environment as well as the quality of life. We ask that this process be more transparent and give your constituents more time to review and provide feedback to council representatives. Please vote no on CB-92. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jana Parker.
Good afternoon. My name is pronounced Jana Parker for future reference, and I'm speaking on behalf of PG Changemakers. Excuse me? I'm speaking on... Oh, okay, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of PG Changemakers in relation to opposition of this bill. This bill, much like CB-91, was put forth to stifle the voice of the people in regards to community-centered development. This bill, much like CB-91, put forth by Calvin Hawkins and Mel Franklin, also sets up a precedent, again, for there to be a large backlash and fiscal mismanagement in case there are lawsuits brought up in regards to how this bill is being put forth and implemented within the county. We saw this before in regards to the gerrymandering issue, which was supported by Calvin Hawkins and Mel Franklin as well, which cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars in legal fees as they sought to protect gerrymandering candidates that out of their district. And those candidates won in the primary, and subsequently, this bill does the same thing. It stops the ability of those candidates from speaking out on behalf of their residents and from their residents from having another recourse in relation to really focusing development to be community-centered. I really urge you to vote against sending this out with a favorable recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Monique Willard. Monique Willard.
Yes, I'm present. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the council. I'm a resident of Parkside at Westphalia in District 6. I'm here to state my firm opposition to CB-92-2022. CB-92 minimizes the council's role in reviewing development cases from the planning board and zoning hearing examiner, thereby silencing the voice of your constituents who have a desire to be heard regarding land use matters. In the summary presented by Council members Franklin and Hawkins, they failed to mention the first two notes within the bill. At least one joint public hearing may, operative word being may, be required by the district council and the planning board. The second note, the district council or planning board elects whether to conduct an evidentiary hearing or oral argument in each application. And again, whether to conduct being operative. The bill is written in a manner that does not make hearings mandatory. They are optional. So again, attempting to silence our voices. If enacted, there will be optional hearings for the community, and only appeals will come before the council under limited circumstances. Their developer friends have long waited to eliminate public hearings to avoid accountability. Additionally, we have not seen the impact of the new zoning laws. Government needs to be transparent, trustworthy, and transformative. CB-92 does not represent any of those positive qualities. We want smart development, and we want to remain a part of the process. Such bills negatively impact our neighborhoods, families, and investments. We also want a council who listens to the constituents who voted them in office. We will not and cannot be ignored. These broad anti-democratic changes impact the quality of civic engagement, community and economic development for generations to come. Again, I oppose CB-92 and ask that you vote no.
Thank you. Next speaker, Millie Hall.
I'm having technical difficulties with my camera. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
It's a good day. Hi, I'm Millie Hall. I live in Bowie. I oppose this bill. I'm here to share my concern for the introduction of CB-92-2022. I believe this bill seeks to undermine transparency of government and normal operations of the council, reference zoning and planning matters. I'm here to suggest that you vote no on CB-92-2022. Additionally, all community stakeholders deserve to be promptly notified of and given ample opportunity to be educated about and provide feedback for any and all legislative matters that affects the fabric of Prince George's County. I expect my elected representatives to be answerable to the people over special interests, i.e. developers. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you consider voting no for CB-92-2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Michael Bridges.
Yes, good. My name is Michael Bridges. I'm a resident of Bowie. I'd like to align myself with all of the previous speakers in opposition to CB-92. This basically feels like a race to the bottom, a race with other counties and jurisdictions to the bottom, seems to be the argument. We want development in our county, so developers are rushing to other counties that have less transparency, that have less public accountability. So let's lower our standards to attract the developers. We shouldn't do that. I also like to take this opportunity to respond to Chairman Hawkins. I listened very closely to your very glowing remarks regarding the planning staff's statement. You glowingly referred to the importance of General Plan 2035. You glowingly referred to their the planning staff's statements talking about the state-of-the-art zoning ordinance, how the code modernizes and consolidates zones and development standards, and how the most effective tool for council to direct development is the effective zoning ordinance, which has been achieved. The new zoning ordinance, together with the council's review and approval of master plans, will be far more effective in accomplishing the council's land use goals. Those words were like nails on a chalkboard in their hypocrisy. Where were you when you completely overruled or voted to overrule the recommendations of the planning board staff with regards to the general plan and other zoning matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Kathy Bartolomeo. I apologize.
That's all right. Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. I opposed CB-92, and also I would have opposed the 91. I grew up in Prince George's County, went to schools here, and retired from teaching. Since adopting the Climate Action Plan, I hope that the council puts forth bills that would tie into the Climate Action Plan that would help this. And I don't see how this CB-92 does that. We do need more accountability from developers. As in the past decades, I've looked around, traveled around, and seen so much clearing of lands and poor decisions made in land use. When I go to Largo driving to give food to someone, I see huge buildings, townhomes, apartments, but few trees, few playgrounds for our children. August 10th, I drove through to get from Greenbelt to Adelphi to get film footage for flooding. It was a pretty scary drive that day, and as you know, we resulted in lots of destruction from the storm. But I'm concerned about the council's leery of them putting forth these two bills in such short notice to the citizens. So thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Bernard Holloway. Bernard Holloway.
My apologies. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir. We can.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bernard Holloway. I live at 801 Oxford Road, 152, User 774. So I am a District 6 resident. I'm having to testify today, actually, in kind of like thoughtful opposition and difference of opinion from a lot of my fellow development lecturers and advocates. Because, like, in contrast to Cheryl, in part because of coalition politics and the fact that I think many other folks, even the committed environmentalists who are on this call, I normally agree with on land use and development issues, I think they're truly wrong on this issue. Because as a 4-decade resident of Prince George's County, and as somebody that has worked to try to unlock transit-oriented development potential of this county actively for at least the past 12 years, as Councilman Franklin and Councilman Hawkins and Councilman Ferris can attest to, for me, the ability to eliminate call-up and district review of land use and development is essential. I will offer just a very brief, very symbolic personal story to bring this home. Many of you all may not know this. I haven't connected with some of you I know with the institution in DC, and I work on national community development policy. Between my cooking job and some other part-time jobs and side work, I easily make comfortably over $100,000 a year. But I, during the past 6 weeks, have had incredibly difficult finding rental accessible, affordable rental at my income level, which is probably approximate to like 100 or 150%. Because simply there aren't that many real options for missing duplex units, as well as significant new construction, transit-oriented development, multifamily units. Because the apartment community room, everything in the background that you see here, is from one of the oldest multifamily developments here at the Downtown Central Station, one of Peter Schwartz's first projects that happened in the late 2000s. And there was a significant time delay between that first set of projects happening and the current set of projects. If you're talking about Ascend, or you're talking about Tapestry, that just been pulled away, and other things that are currently in the development pipeline. Literally because of the way in which district council review, and the previous council member during the late 2000s utilized district council review to block development that was in the long-term master zone plan. So one quick second. is that citizens that participate in the master planning process to want to make activity centers and their town centers have thoughtful, specific directions in keeping with Plan 2035. Their beliefs and visions can't be invested in if individual council members can call up a project whenever they see fit to. And so I really hope that like this council, even if they might table it, will really engage in further discussion and conversation and make sure that the next council beginning in December brings back minutes to ensure that this important provision. Council Chair Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Layla Riazi.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Council Chair, and thank you to the committee for the work that you're doing on these issues. What you've heard today is that people are not in a place of trust, and you can rectify that. And that's what I'm asking for you to do. We just had the zoning ordinance go into effect in April of this year. There's a 2-year process of adjustment of working with this, working with the old zoning and the new zoning. Coming forward with all of these changes after there has been so much work in this process with such a short timeline is only exacerbating public distrust in the council process. And once again, you can rectify that. I understand wanting to pull back call up for some reasons, but I'll tell you it is certainly premature. It also is not often used. And I understand what the planning board is saying about how we have a well-written zoning ordinance to address these issues. We need to allow that to mature, and we need to allow people to experience that process and for us to improve the systems that we have at play so that people feel heard and feel listened to in this and are able to fully participate. Taking this action now will be detrimental to all public process and to all public faith. I urge you to not have this go out of committee. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you to all those who have commented before me. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, John Morrissey. Next speaker, John Morrissey. Next speaker, David Walker.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is David Walker. I'm Vice President of Sunrise Homeowners Association located in Fort Washington, Maryland, District 8. I'm a 45-year resident of Prince George's County, and I'm here to communicate my community's opposition to CB-92. We have concerns about, we already had concerns about visibility or the community's ability to comment on different issues or even to know about, as someone before me mentioned, we don't even know about the developments. We're not even notified until it's very late in the process. Anything that will take away from our ability to communicate our concerns, we're in opposition to. My community represents 111 houses, and we've met on this. And certainly, we're not against new industry development, but at what price? We know that there's at Rosecroft racetrack is being sold, and they're proposing Amazon warehouses, which is outside of the zoning. It's not commercially zoned, and it would burden us with excessive traffic, and also endanger our children with bypasses into residential areas. So we are strongly opposed to the CB-92, and would hope, and I've heard overwhelming opposition from your constituents today. Certainly, I hope you would vote down CB-92. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Karen Williamson. Last speaker, Karen Williamson.
That's
That concludes the speakers list, Mr. Chair.
Would I be able to speak? I was called early on, Leo Shapiro.
Sure.
A message
Hello?
to speak as well on the website.
I'm sorry? I was called, I think I was second or third. Can I speak now?
Yes, you can.
My name is Leo Shapiro. I live in College Park, and I am testifying just to strongly oppose CB-92. I hope you'll reject it. The people elected a new council, and for good reason. We need a more thoughtful approach to development that involves more than simply rushing through approvals for any project any developer wants. The corruption and astonishing lack of integrity and a commitment to democracy and responsible governance that has long prevailed in our county has made our county the punchline for jokes for generations. We can and must do better. Although probably futile, I would like to remind council members that they are supposed to be serving the best interests of Prince George's County, not simply maximizing profits for the developers who may have put them in office. The basic premise of CB-92 is anti-democratic, anti-community, and frankly, indefensible for anyone with integrity. If a particular development project cannot withstand public scrutiny, it shouldn't happen. This is yet another ugly abuse of power as certain council members attempt to try to take away our right to representation. Our county should belong to the people, and we have elected a new council to represent us. Please back off from your shameful power grab and let the new council do its job. Thank you very much.
Again, Madam Speaker, I'm registered to speak for Council Bill 91 and 92. Yes,
yeah, I'm sorry. Sir, can you identify yourself? What is your name?
Yes. Name is Jacques Chevalier. I live in Bowie, Maryland, and I, in fact, registered on the site yesterday for Council Bill 91 and 92.
Okay, Mr. Chevalier, let's check. Ms.
Chevalier.
Brown, do you have his name on the list, Ms. Brown?
I have his name on the list for CB-91.
Okay. It may have just been a technical glitch. Go ahead, Mr. Chevalier.
All right, I'd like to cave in to developers and the swiping of the citizens concerns executive by at-large dues, Hawkins, and Frankston.
Here.
And some majority of all zoning variances and the amendments county. Additionally, I'm requesting the FBI and Maryland prosecutors to formally start an investigation of Hawkins and Franklin to determine if they are in fact accepting bribes and other favors in office. Lastly, to the vote piece, some of you are the most ignorant, lazy citizens who advocate votes to anyone with a slick brochure and colorful signs. You may blame and stupidity of voting for 2 large seats costing us good middle class citizens millions for their offices and perks controlled by the developers. Further, tens of millions of dollars in our tax revenue has to subsidize new schools, roads, police, and fire departments, and a heavy unjust burden on finances for all the citizens in this county, and especially us older citizens. These council members never run to lawyer taxes, but do run and for developers relentlessly. I am pleading with the council body to the same entity that you put in for developers, put something in to lower the property taxes for seniors like do in Washington, D.C. after they reach 65 with income-based legislation.
Thank you, sir.
To,
Thank you, Mr. Chevalier. Your time has expired. Yeah, your connection is very spotty, but your time has expired. Thank you for your comment. Ms. Brown, any further?
Hello, yeah, this is John Tabori. I believe I'm on the speaker's list. Maybe you called and I didn't hear you.
Ms. Brown, can you check for Mr. Tabori?
Also, Mr. Tabori was signed up on CB-91-2022.
Gotcha. Mr. Tabori, yeah, you'll have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you.
Let's wait for the recent time.
Yeah, for the record, my name is John Rogart Tabori, and I reside in University Park, Maryland, which is District 3. This afternoon, I'm speaking in strong opposition to CB-92-2022. And I would incorporate all of the comments in opposition by reference. Let me just point out why I believe that the call-up procedure is important at this time. First, it protects the rights and interests of property owners and residents who live in proximity to the development, but may not have standing to appear as a person of record and testify during the planning board hearings. And by the way, standing is a rather important issue. Second, and this may be of considerable importance during the transition from the old to the new ordinance, the implied threat of the ability to pull up and review planning board decisions helps to ensure compliance with the new ordinance development standards. And we just don't have that much information about this at this point. I will close by stating that I strongly believe that CB-92 will significantly narrow, if not close to excluding, get close to excluding public engagement, comment, and influence. Therefore, I urge you very strongly to oppose this bill and to vote no. I would also point out that contrary to the comments by the planning board on the economics of the call-up, Prince George's County is the leading county in the state of Maryland in development right now, or at least it was when I did my presentation before the redevelopment authority in March. That was a carefully done study by myself, and I would urge you not to play around with that by introducing issues like this at this time. So again, please vote no.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, I believe, does that complete our speakers list?
That concludes, yes, the speakers list I have on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have an amendment. What I would do just to get us into discussion is to move favorable on CB-92 with the one amendment that Ms. Zavakos has to make ensure that it applies to new applications for the old ordinance for those who are still going to utilize the old ordinance. But I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I second your motion.
Thank you. It's been moved by myself, seconded by Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins, can you briefly describe the amendment? Did we lose? Okay.
Sure. Oh, nope. Sorry about that. It took a minute for the camera to come on. Yes. Basically, it would be an amendment to the transitional provisions, and it would be basically a new subsection added to the transitional provisions that would say this would apply to any application processed under the transitional provisions of this code. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the motion, and Mr. Hawkins can agree as well. The motion also incorporates the planning board's recommended edits as well. If Mr. Hawkins is my second, is in agreement with that.
Yes, I'm glad you raised that.
Thank you. We'll now move to discussion. I'll turn to my colleagues, but first I do want to thank all of the callers and the public participants. This is an issue that many folks are passionate about. I'll make just a few points. I'm not going to rehash my long statement at the beginning. I'll just say that we do need to improve our process for informing the public about their rights to appeal. I think that's an important avenue to make sure that if folks are opposed to a project, where that they understand how to become a person of record, and that they understand how to appeal a project. And I think those are critical things that we will continue to do. In fact, I think the piece of legislation that we advanced today, CB-60 and CB-61, will help with that. Thank you to my colleagues who pushed that legislation forward. But again, this goes back to just a very simple point. We are doing something that is perhaps a worse practice for economic development in the nation, and that's just a reality. Even the consultants who helped craft our new zoning rewrite, one of their initial proposals was to end call-up. We didn't go along with that at the time, but that was one of their initial proposals, because it's just clear to anyone who studies economic development, particularly in the 21st century economy. It's clear that that's something we're doing that no one else is doing, and is dramatically a very poor practice. What many of the concerns talked about are things that we need to work on to improve public awareness of their rights, public awareness of the process. I think we will continue to do that, and I think we've taken steps with the new ordinance to do that, and we should continue to do that. But that is really what this is all about. No one, and anyone who's heard me talk about it, but also others on this council talk about it, this is not a new issue. This is an issue that's been talked about for years. It is rare to have a body decide to give up power, but in this instance, I think it's a decision that we should make for the betterment of Prince George's County. That's really what this is all about. With that, I'm going to yield the floor in this discussion to my colleagues. I'll first start with those on the committee.
Sure, Franklin, I have a question and comment when you have a moment.
Sure. I think you were first. I didn't see another hand. So you're first in discussion. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just a few quick questions, because I know this bill applies not just to detailed site plans, but also applies to major departures, VHE decisions that come in front of us, and non-conforming uses. I have a question, and maybe planning staff could just refresh my memory because I don't have the text in front of me. What is characterized as a major departure underneath our current or our new ordinance?
I'll defer to Ms. Zavakos on that.
Yes, and Ms. Zavakis will immediately turn to co-counsel to fill in the gaps. My understanding of a major departure goes to the extent to which the departure affects the project, but I really do need some substantive fill-in from my colleagues in the public arena from Park and Planning. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am trying to expeditiously or expeditiously look that up. So you'd have to give me a moment.
So we'll circle back to that. Mrs. Galaris, did you have another question?
Yeah, so on the, I guess sort of a question on the VHE procedure then, while we're waiting on the major departure. So today, when there is a rezoning decision or decision from the zoning hearing examiner, that can be appealed to the county council, but the council now has the ability also to review those decisions irrespective of whether there's an appeal on the table. Is it correct that I'm following that appeal process, that call-up process also by the county council will be eliminated by this legislation?
Yes,
So
that's my
it.
understanding.
And then
The only
do
thing,
you have data?
Ms. Claros, I'm so sorry, but the only thing I would add, remember with rezoning, we're not making a decision. Both the ZHE and the planning board are giving you a recommendation. You're actually making the decision. So it's not an appeal per se.
So then can you speak, Noreen, to the section that deals with the change in process from the ZHE? What cases would this affect?
Special exceptions, primarily from our perspective, and probably site plans from the planning board's perspective. Anything that we could finally decide that needs to be appealed by the entities that appear before us, you all currently have also been able to pull it up yourselves, even if they do not appeal.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then I did have one last question, but I don't know if Ms. Hightower has the response on the major departure.
I am you can hear me. Councilmember Guerreros, I am looking, and the district council has the appeal rights. The
what
major departments allow for, it allows for a greater percentage. I'm being told by one of our, Jill Kozak, one of our excellent people, major departments, departures just allow for a greater percentage of departure from the required standard. Does that answer your question?
And what's that percentage that differentiates between a minor and major? Because I do see that in the legislation, it's adding language in for minor departures and major departures, and those would be under someone else's purview, elected for review by the council body. What is the differentiation in percentage?
I'm sorry, I cannot hear you clearly. I apologize. Say that again. I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear you clearly.
No, that's okay. Can you hear me okay right now?
A little better. Yes, ma'am.
So I guess my question is what is that percentage then, the difference between minor and major in terms of the percentage difference from the standard? Maybe Jill could answer that, or Ms. Kozak. My apologies.
She's not online and is emailing me.
I can.
Mr. Rowe is available.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe.
A minor departure is generally between 20 to 40% of the standard, and a major departure is between 40 and 100% of the standard, depending on the standard. And there's almost a whole page of standards from which an applicant can seek a departure.
Okay, and then
that's correct.
Jill
said that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then I don't have a list of how many cases have been called up over the last 4 years, although it would be interesting to have that by council member. But I think I would just put a few things on the table for this body to consider. If you can hear me okay. So one is I would suggest, like many of the speakers here today, that this is not yet ready for prime time. But if this body wants to move forward with this legislation, I would really recommend that you only move forward with portions of changing what the district council's ability to elect to review is. Because I would argue that major departures, hold on one second.
Sorry, my AirPods just lost. Can you hear me okay?
Hello? Yes, we can.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was having challenges with my Bluetooth. What I was going to say is I would actually urge this council, rather than moving this motion as has been done, one, I would recommend holding, because I do think there's additional consideration that needs to be made. I don't call up a lot of cases, but I can explain very quickly the two that I have over my 8 years called up. And I think that there were very justifiable reasons, and that actually helped being able to sort of review them for a bunch of things that were that happen throughout those cases. But I oftentimes would say we have great development in District 3. There's a lot of project pipelining in my district. Me having that power is not holding them back. If anything, them knowing that I have the acumen to pull it up if indeed they're not following the plans that the community has signed off on, I think is a really powerful tool. It's like a parent, right? When you know, your child knows you're not going to punish them every day, but they know you can pull that trigger if you need to. And I think, and I do a similar comparison on this one, because at this stage in the game, I'll be honest with you, seeing the bills that are coming, seeing the bills that are still on this agenda, it really does beg the question as to what type of development we're going to get moving forward if this tool is not available, even if it's never exercised by the county council. But I would suggest this body consider the following. Major departure is a very big deal. We should not be giving out our election to review, especially on major departure, especially as we have a new ordinance that's underway. We have not even seen the first case under the new ordinance pipeline through development review with the planning board. Secondly, I would be very cautious about doing the same thing with the zoning hearing examiners. Those special exception cases are very important, right? There's a reason why we put the special exception on there. I would not recommend that we do that at this time. And third, I would definitely not recommend that we do this for DSPs across the board. Remember, this whole power was part of the negotiation back in 2018 when we did all the grandfathering and transition provisions. And there's a lot of projects out there that are completely grandfathered in. That over the next 5 or 10 years. Some of them have out years way further than what any of the next council's term will even be. So I would really encourage us to be way more this existing ability that the council has to elect to review. If you do feel the need to move forward today, I would highly recommend you do it in a narrower fashion. I think addressing it for expedited COD projects, that makes a lot of sense, right? And that's definitely in line with even what we heard from the public back in 2018. I think doing so for non-conforming, even make an argument for minor departures, not major departures. So I would really consider a substitute motion. I'm going to put that on the table now to move forward with a substitute motion that just changes the district council's ability to review the appropriate language and tables, and just does that for expedited TOD, non-conforming uses, and just minor departures.
Motion dies for one of a second. All right, do you have any more comment, Ms. Caleros? Or we have enough more speakers. Okay. Ms. Caleros, can you hear us?
Hello?
Yes, your motion died for one of a second. Do you have any more discussion before I move into other speakers?
No discussion.
Okay, thank you. Who else seeks to be recognized? Mr. Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief on this one. I appreciate, particularly Mr. Franklin has been very consistent on this issue, both during our consideration of the new zoning ordinance prior to 2018 and since then with respect to the call-up procedure. From my perspective, having worked on the zoning ordinance in a little more detail, there was a lot of discussion in the previous council about whether or not we wanted to give up this authority that is authority under state law. As we're well aware, we've had other judicial decisions that have narrowed our authority in some particular cases. And so obviously with the new zoning ordinance, some of those cases are no longer relevant because they won't move forward under the new zoning ordinance. But I'll say I'm squarely in the camp of, while I understand the fairness, the uniformity, for developers and others who want to come into this county, to know what the process is going to be and to be able to do that investment. I understand the balancing of those two things. And if And if the council as a body wants to change what the previous council does, as the next council could do as well, I'm not opposed to having that conversation and discussion, but I will simply say I fall squarely in the camp of I don't want to give up any council authority, particularly those that are under state law that could be ripe for reconsideration by our colleagues at the state level. I think that's something that we need to be concerned about since we do have that express authority under the Regional District Act. So I thank Mr. Franklin and Mr. Hawkins for bringing this forward, but I will not be supporting the motion at this point. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Denoga.
Thank you. I'm going to be very brief because I don't want to belabor this. And I do agree that Mr. Franklin has been consistent on this issue. Mr. DeBoer brought up the point that I was going to make. I want to put a finer point on it. I want to push back gently against Mr. Franklin's comments at the beginning. They're good comments, and I think they're generally accurate, but I don't think they are complete. One of the biggest concerns that I have is, number one, as we discussed in the previous bills, too many citizens don't know how to get engaged in the process. They find out things too late. But more importantly, we used to have the broadest standing bill in the state. And then mysteriously, and I mean mysteriously, it disappeared around 2015 at the General Assembly level. We now have the most restrictive standing law in the state. So even if citizens get engaged, they don't have standing to bring an appeal to the county council. So the council can't call up and citizens who are unhappy can't bring it up. That is an issue that we need to see about getting rectified by having the state reinstitute the standing rules that we used to have. Things that a right of that level, that magnitude, should not disappear late in the session when no citizen has been informed about it. And I think it behooves the next council going forward to seek to get that reinstated. Thank you, Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Denoga. See no further discussion. We'll now have a roll call.
Chair Franklin.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Galeros.
I vote no.
Councilmember Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Hawkins.
Respect everything I've heard. I vote aye.
Councilmember Turner.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I vote no.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Madam Clerk, that's no. I'm sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Motion carries 3-2.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, let's go to the next item.